English translation, 121st contact. Saturday, 24th March 1979, 1340 HRs.
That once again lasted rather long, you black rose among the star children.
You are very kind.
What do you mean? When I but see you in such a manner, then I can only be kind to you. You know, I had to call for quite a long time before you finally gave just an answer, and then it took about another week before you could finally come. I also continuously tried during the last few weeks to take up contact with Quetzal, Ta, and Sim Yase, which once again failed completely for me, unfortunately. It seems to me by the complete silence, just as if the three would be absent in some other dimension outside of my calling ability. Can you tell me more details about that?
I can do that. Sim Ya Se. And you need not be worried about her, for there is no reason at all for that. She is presently in the Dial universe. First of 3 months. So, at the end of the month of June, she will be back. This also applies to Ptah and Quetzal, who accompany Sim Ya Se, as well as her sister, Plagia. Unfortunately, Sim Ya Se has suffered damage of an illness-related form, which is associated with her previous accident, which happened to her in your center.
But why is that? Because we were told that everything was in the best order. It also seemed to me that her state of health was rather good.
She also had no problems until the date of the 26th of February. But on this day, she personally carried out a very important analysis for the first time, in whose course and result she got so worked up that her artificial brain mass, that was still in transition, produced dangerous changes, through which she fell into a deep coma. The only possibility left for us was to bring her immediately to Tzket's people in the DAL universe, where she is now being brought back to good health by the same scientists who treated Sim Ya Se before. In the meantime, it is already very good with her again. But now, it is being tried to transform the artificial brain convolutions in a very short time through certain procedures and innovations, after which such incidents should not appear anymore. The attempts for this plan are still ongoing, but these should be completed and finished in the course of next week, after which then the actual transformation treatment will be carried out, which should take about 2 months.
Man, girl, we should already be so far here on the Earth. But tell me, why has the girl since gone mad? And is she really well?
Her well-being is really good, and no complications have appeared. The reasons for the illness, however, lie in matters that I must explain to you in rather unpleasant contexts, which is also why I came here, because I have to do this whether I want to now or not.
What then do you have in stock?
I must explain it to you, and I also must tell you that I am here in representation of Quetzal, who is absent.
Then you are, so to speak, the station boss?
As you state, yes.
Fine, then fire away at once. Your speech certainly will not bring something pleasant, as I infer from your words.
With which you think quite right, unfortunately.
If only I had been mistaken.
I can empathize with your desire. but I cannot do otherwise and must fulfill my duty, even though this is probably more difficult for me than anything else before in my life. The things that I must announce to you are that the contacts will now be finally terminated, as was predetermined by a decision that if up to the beginning of the month of March 1979, no decisive changes would arise in the behavior and actions, as well as in the entire individual guidance and organization of the group members. What we hoped for has not arisen, unfortunately, because with various members of the group, no changes have been made in any form, even though this was presented differently on the outside by them. Truly, they put on a very regrettable show, by which means they hoped to deceive us, and also you, which is naturally denied by them. However, which is why you also should not address these things with them. In contrast to these, others have indeed striven for a necessary change, but in a framework too small to be able to be taken into account for a preservation of the contacts and the continuation of the mission. So there truthfully remain only very few members who can be counted on a single hand, whose effort was such that it can be considered as good grounds. But since the negatives are predominant, I, in representation of Quetzal, may not take responsibility for allowing the contacts to continue to exist. For in this respect, I have very precise instructions, which I cannot get around in any wise. At the same time, unfortunately, I also have to include you in the range of those who have not truly striven for the continued existence of the contacts and for the fulfillment of the mission, because the monitoring recordings have clearly shown that you acted against Quetzal's specific instructions, which you know very well. So namely, in the case of Herbert, you, on behalf of the group, arbitrarily freed him from his financial obligation, even though Quetzal clearly determined that also Herbert was to be incorporated into his financial obligation to the group and, with that, also to the mission, as he can actually meet this obligation in truth if he only wants. You should not have taken this arbitrary disregard of Quetzal's instruction upon yourself. You just should not have. It must also be charged to you, however, that you evidently have not informed the group members enough in reference to what was expected in connection with the contacts and the changes of the group members. If these changes were not brought about in a decisive form, and indeed within the given time up to the beginning of the month of March. But not only you seriously violated Quetzal's determinations, as you recognize now, but also the group member, Madeline, and Jacobus in particular. Madeline, if she would have thought about herself, would have had to recognize that she has to change in various things. Particularly, it occurs with her that she is extremely reluctant in reference to the daily works to be done in the center, and is even ill-tempered about these and averse to these. But also in complying with the rules of regulation, very many points are open with her, which she follows in no wise. So she lets it happen that she often sees things with other group members, but also with the children, in order then to present these in a childish manner to some other group member in a treacherous form, even though she has to take no notice at all of the matters complained of. Her behavior and conduct relating to this are built on betrayal, resentment, and, in a certain sense, on jealousy and egoism. Also towards your wedded wife, she does not behave in the manner that is clearly and plainly given by the rules of regulation, and that must be followed. In reference to the work itself, she is completely disinterested and so averse that she looks for any smallest opportunity to keep herself away from it, whereby even pretenses of illness come to light, even though the sufferings are absent or are only of very little significance. Most severely objectionable are also her lying down times in the Sohar Center, where she hardly tries to make progress and very often only uses the site as a place of rest. So she sometimes only makes extremely minimal or no progress at all. As for Jacobus, it is to be objected to in severe measure that he gives very little thought to his duty regarding the time compliance for the introduction of practitioners in the Sohar Center, whereby very grossly negligent time shifts appear. But this also applies to his own meditative exercises in the center, which he neglects very much, which is also the case with your wife, who also leaves her appointed times unused, like Jacobus, who also very incorrectly places himself outside the rules in various other things. So according to the recordings, it arose recently that with regard to the treatment and order towards your wife and your children, he again places himself into things in such a manner that he insults them and threatens them, even though he was very clearly oriented by Kitsal and Simya Say about the fact that he has to interfere in these matters just as little as also any other group member.
On the other hand,
In our view, the three children behave and develop, at least for the moment, exactly according to our conceptions and our hope. So, at the given point in time, they would have become able to take over and carry out their tasks if the final termination of the contacts would not have appeared, whereby everything is eliminated. However, it should be noted with this that in all three children, the thorn of damage has already been incurred, which could have expanded over time to possible danger if we had pursued our task even further. This is so because through the manner of Jacobus and your wife, things began to change in the children, which are of a rather negative value. Also, Madeleine contributed her part to it, as she also could not refrain from interfering in the concerns of the children. Also, with Elsie, various things are to be objected to, particularly those things for which Ptah, Quetzal, and indeed even Simya Se already had to reprimand her several times before. But not least, I myself must say to this, that she has a very special way of getting stuck on something with stubbornness, bordering on hard-headedness, even though she knows perfectly well that she only provokes strife or outbursts of anger thereby. The fact that she then still speaks of a so-called hope up to the last moment, or of the fact that she is rightful in her thinking and acting, only testifies to pure irrationality, as well as of the fact that she simply does not want to accept the truth that is very well known to her. The major evil of the whole thing is that most group members continuously object to our determinations and regulatory instructions, etc. And due to the irrationality of the group members concerned, it is even maintained in their faint-hearted lack of understanding and their affectation of wanting to understand that we are unjust and act unjustly, as was the case, for example, in reference to HS, because we would not eliminate his spirit form in a natural way as a result of malicious betrayal and destructiveness in relation to the mission. Whoever calls out such statements and demands, however, has certainly not yet fully grasped the true meaning of our mission, and these are, unfortunately, several group members. And what all this has led to now, this proved itself clearly and plainly in the month of February, when Simya Se collapsed, and all that just because she had to convince herself through her own analysis of the incomprehensible, limitless, treacherous, and unreasonable stubbornness, and the equally limitless egoism of HS, that he does not want to become of any mind to obey the orders of Quetzal. She also saw from the analyses, however, that also the break of contacts had to result for you and the group, which she herself was not able to bear any more. These are the reasons for the fact that everything has now found a final end, and that there can no longer be a continuation of our contacts, if at least only a single major change or a single determining fulfillment of duty would have appeared for all group members. Then I myself would have been able to take responsibility for granting you all one last time period, at least until the return of Simya Se, Ptah, and Quetzal, which very well would have meant a true battle for me, however, in reference to a request and an intercession for you all. But as the things are now, no possibility whatsoever is given to me. That is how the things are now, unfortunately. You are silent.
What am I supposed to say to that? I myself know really well enough that every single one of your words corresponds to the truth, and that you still have not mentioned everything that would be objectionable.
You speak very correctly and in accordance with a very good overview of all concerns. But since that is so, I cannot understand that you too have broken Quetzal's determinations. Just why did you do that? It is simply incomprehensible to me.
Yes, you said something just now about Elsie. That she preserves wrong hopes to the end against better knowledge, which are, nevertheless, truly no hopes, but rather only a stubbornness bordering on hard-headedness. I think that I am probably sick at the same place, for I hoped that through my actions, the group members concerned would, nevertheless, still do the right thing by themselves, if one granted them enough time. I now know that this was wrong, and that I have also messed things up. On the other hand, I also know very well that there must be a limit somewhere, and that one may not just constantly show consideration where none is appropriate.
Your words are honest. And on the other hand, I actually should have known that. It is indeed well known to us that you always grant everyone another chance whenever this is possible for you at all. But that has nothing to do with false hopes against better knowledge, as is the case with Elsie. Nevertheless, you should not have done this right at the present time, but should have correctly complied with Quetzal's determinations, for you knew very well what effects any wrong action would bring.
You are right. I know that only too well. But if you stood in my place, then you certainly would have also acted in such a manner.
I will not deny that, but it is still questionable.
Of course, it cannot be denied. Certainly. It is also true that I have simply become tired of constantly making the same speeches without success, and urging various group members over and over again, in order to have them reflect at last and act in accordance with what should be. One can hold that against me, that is right. But for once, I am also at the end, which is why I cannot even be angry now about the fact that everything is now over. If I want to be honest, then I even must say that I am kind of relieved, because the whole drama is finally over.
You are resigned and exhausted, which is not surprising, however. You had to bear and carry out very much more in the last 2 years than what another human being of Earth would have ever been able to bear. Someone else in your place would have almost certainly collapsed already after the first 3 months and would have had to give up.
It probably was not that bad, but it was hard, that is right.
My words correspond to the truth. For your own person, you see all things only according to your own values, which is why you also always demand so much of yourself, but which would certainly not be possible for other human beings.
You exaggerate just like Simyase. But that now does not matter anymore, for after all, it is all over. There is now nothing else left than to say goodbye and to let ourselves go our separate ways. So farewell, Black Rose, and please do not be angry with me that I have failed. It just had to come so far sometime, because with the Earth humans, who, under no circumstances, bear their responsibility themselves and who always want to know everything better in their damned logic, with these, such a difficult mission probably cannot be carried out.
I am only now becoming painfully aware of how much your words correspond to the truth, and how much deep pain also surges in you this.
Leave it, please, because now is not the time to state even these things. It would only bring us both into difficulties. Therefore, let us leave these things. Let us simply go our separate ways, but we can still think of each other in friendship, so I think.
That will, unfortunately, be the only thing that we still have left, because after Quetzal's return, we will leave the earth and will not return.
So then, I cannot even say goodbye once more to Ptah, Simya-se, or Quetzal.
They will not grant themselves this difficult hour, and with certainty will not still visit you one last time. Oh, if only I could still change everything. It is really...
Man, girl, leave it, please. With crying, you only make everything even worse. Farewell, and do not be damn. Farewell continuation of the contact.
My friend, Billy, do not be frightened. It is I, Manara.
Where do you come from?
I just could not leave after your departure. So I followed you and have been watching you now for 20 minutes as you sit here and ponder.
However, you should have rather flown back to the station, because now the farewell only begins in such a manner again. Why must you make everything even more difficult?
I am so very sorry about everything, and your sadness hurts me very much, which is why I do not want to let you go in such a manner as you took leave.
But I cannot help it.
You violate your feelings.
Please understand that I cannot simply leave in such a manner when I know that you are grieving and that you are in despair. Understand that I feel very deep love for you and that you are like a brother to me. As this also occurs with Simya-se and Plaja, as well as Quetzal and Ptah. It is just that we female beings connect everything with even deeper feelings than what Quetzal and Ptah do. And I know very well that even you are connected to our relevant forms, which is why I am very well oriented about how terribly everything in you is in turmoil.
I know, you're right, but one must also deal with a hell of this damned kind, whether one wants to now or not. But you know, somehow, I came to the contact today with high hopes, because I thought that it would at least be considered that on March 3rd. For the first time, the whole group acted uniformly and in complete unity together, in accordance with one of Quetzal's determinations. I thought that at least this would help to make it clear to you all that hope is not lost, and that all group members are slowly starting to take their duties seriously, and are also willing to slowly bear the responsibility themselves.
I do not understand.
But you must understand this, nevertheless, because you have, indeed, carried out continuous inspections for several months, according to which, as far as I know, every single word spoken by us and all thoughts and actions, etc., must be registered.
That corresponds to correctness, but I still do not understand the sense of your words.
Now tell me that you actually know nothing about it.
I really do not understand a word of your speech.
On the 3rd of March at midnight, the time period had expired for HS, right?
That corresponds to the truth, to the extent that the time limit was until 21 Hne HRs. Yes. But what do you want to suggest with that?
Quetzal determined that H would have to be excluded from the core group, by a unanimous agreement of the group if he would not fit himself into Quetzal's determinations for his own improvement, right?
That is right. Continue.
Now, it should be known to you through the recordings. Nevertheless, that H was excluded, by a uniform action of the group, in writing and correctly, from the core group and from all matters surrounding the entire task. And in addition, I thought that this action, even if it is truly the first compliance with a determination, that this should still be sufficient to let you recognize that the group has now finally come so far and is trying hard to bear their responsibility themselves and to fulfill their duty.
That was actually done?
But of course, which you should know, nevertheless on the basis of your recordings. It must also be shown from these that in this regard, I also held to my given word and did not say a word to H about what would await him if he would drop out. So he still does not know that through his exclusion, his consciousness form becomes freed, through a natural departure of all real knowledge that he gained through us, and that he will change back over the course of about 15 years in order to be freed from his existence with regard to the truth. All of this should be, at least, so I hoped, a reason for the fact that our goodwill becomes recognized, or that more precisely, our goodwill becomes recognized by you all, and is accordingly evaluated in our favor.
If that is truly so, then this would be a very good reason for maintaining the contacts.
Do you doubt my words?
No, I truly do not. But I knew nothing about that, which I do not understand again, because the recordings would have had to tell me these things, which they did not do, however.
What are the recordings stored on?
They are very small electronic storage disks, the size of a normal female thumbnail.
Aha, and you could not have lost such a storage element?
No, with absolute certainty not. There would only be the possibility that one of the elements would be defective, by which means recordings would be missing. I will immediately let it be checked. Wait a few minutes. I will immediately give the instruction so that the things are checked in the station.
Minara speaks with someone by means of a kind of video device, with a man unknown to Billy.
So now we will know in a few seconds whether any of the storage elements. Yes, here comes the answer already. One moment.
Minara listens intently to the man's voice, which explains some things to her. Yes, you were right with your assumption that something was lost. But it was not a storage element, but rather a microscopically small connecting piece between two tiny storage cells, by which means the recordings were not played. They were recorded, however, and thus I know the data now. I am sorry that this misfortune has happened to me. Somehow, I must have damaged the element during a manipulation. The stored data, however, clearly confirm your words, so of course, everything looks a little different than what I said to you. After these recordings, your hopes also very clearly find authorization, which must be considered by us in any case. As you said, the action in the case of H was uniformly carried out by all group members, as this corresponded to Quetzal's arrangement. But this is, in fact, also the very first action followed in a correct form, which also indicates, however, that there is truly an interest for a decisive change of the group members from these themselves. As a representative of Quetzal, this entitles me to act in accordance with your hopes and to give you the promise that the contacts are not to be interrupted, at least not for the time being. So, therefore, at least a further time period arises, which serves for the continued existence of everything. If it now truly progresses in the form and becomes worked in every respect, as this was done through the correct exclusion of H by the totality of the group members. In accordance with the recordings, however, I cannot help but state certain criticisms for those who found the exclusion to be unjust and unnecessary, despite their confirmations and acknowledgments. In particular, I must, in this respect, give a strong reprimand to your wife, whose relevant behavior speaks completely contrary to her development, which she has apparently worked out in herself in recent months. In particular, I also cannot help but put Elsie in her place harshly, because in accordance with her unreasonable doing, it was only 10 minutes before the appointed time, before the action was carried out. So, not very much time was left before the destruction of all things, for I had the instruction to pay attention to extreme punctuality in all things, which I therefore must also do in this case. With regard to this, the recordings now show that the time was only kept because of your determined and unyielding conduct, even though you were mistaken about the time assumption. The recordings show here that you had to rebuke and ask Elsie repeatedly before she attended to her duty, which, unfortunately, speaks much to her disfavor. Her frequent obstinacy and stubbornness bordering on hard-headedness truly does not exactly point to a great rationality and inclusion in certain things, if these cannot be integrated into her thoughts and aspirations. Look here, these are her words, if you can decipher the symbols. And these characters here are the recordings of her true thinking and the unconscious. You can recognize from this that she acts against better knowledge, but, according to these characters here, denies this on the outside and surrounds it with another mantle, which does not correspond to the truth. Look here. These distinct symbols testify to a non-controlled pig-headedness and hard-headedness, which exist to such an extent that one must speak of a stubbornness. But now, my dear friend, be reassured, because despite these things that have happened, the entire action entitles me to give you all at least so long a time until Quetzal returns. But if everything is to continue at that point in time, then it is necessary that the changes and actions continue and progress for the better with all group members, so that the brought-about action does not remain the only one. As I am responsible for the things of Quetzal, this lets my concern be calm, whereby I give you my word that I will turn everything to the best, just making sure, however, that all the things of the group members now proceed in the right direction, as this must be. But my effort should also just be to make sure that each individual group member becomes excluded immediately and irrevocably by all of the group members, if he or she rebels even only in the slightest form against the already existing rules of regulation and determinations, or simply ignores them and does not follow them. At the same time, the same form with the same consequences shall apply to everyone uniformly, as this has become the case with HS. For this reason, I have to give some or certain group members some rules of conduct, according to which they must resolve a number of points of deficiency in a very quick manner, if they do not want to be excluded at the latest, at Quetzal's return by his determination, or even by my determination, and at an earlier point in time. At the same time, unfortunately, I cannot get around mentioning the relevant group members by name, which will again lead to the fact that those concerned will feel unjustly criticized, which happens against their better knowledge, however. Therefore, they all must learn very quickly, in this respect, to recognize themselves in honesty, and to recognize the mistakes shown to them as such, and to change these for the better. It must also finally come to an end that out of unreason, illogic, and lack of understanding, certain pointings out of errors, objections, and determinations of various group members are discriminated against and are dismissed as illogical, just because their possibilities of processing, registering, and understanding are not yet developed so far that they have an overview of these. In particular, this applies to the group members Jacobus, Elsie, Herbert, and Guido. With Engelbert, the things are such that he often considers different things too little. Before he reaches a decision, so it happens that he forms a view or opinion, which he must then revise again once you clarify the concerns. Also, in his consequence, he is not stable enough when it concerns issues with which he must give instructions to other group members. His perseverance and his determination must become of a much better form in this respect. For Herbert, I must set a final time period, during which he still has time to adapt himself into everything at last and also to meet his financial obligations, with which he now finally has to begin this month. If he does not honor his financial obligation, and indeed already starting from the month of April, then by the whole group, the exclusion from the same is to be given to him. It must be like that because all group members go on the same track and have the same obligations. So for Herbert, 150 francs are set for 1 month, an amount that can very well be applied by him if he only wants. It just is not right that he only wants to be a beneficiary without wanting to take on any obligations through which the others are caused hardship. With K, the case is such that now at last, he is also to adapt himself into the entire given order of all rules and determinations, and is to endeavor himself in a very special measure around the teaching and around its appropriation. For the next 2 years, no exceptions at all can be made valid for him and with him anymore. However, also no walkouts at all can be considered with him anymore. Like every other group member, he has to use the Sohar Center twice a month and also has to appear regularly at the 2 fixed meetings of the internal group. I can grant him a training period relating to this up to Quetzal's return. The same time limit is set for Madeleine, otherwise she too must be subject to an exclusion. The objectionable concerns with her were already mentioned by me. But I must still suggest to her that she may no longer interfere in anywise in the affairs of your and your wife's children, and she also has to refrain from inflicting pain on them through lashes. But in particular, she is to make sure that she fixes her childish behavior in reference to the accusing of others, as appears with her pronouncedly. In all other respects, this is in serious violation of the rules of regulation as are given to the group. Jacobus must also still be mentioned, and also for him, I can only set a time limit up to Quetzal's return. His constant expressions regarding murdering and killing can in no wise be reconciled with the teaching and its observance. But it must also be said to him, like with Madeleine, and this for the last time, that he in no wise has to interfere in the affairs of your and your wife's children. At least at present, these are still developing exactly according to our conceptions and in accordance with all that we hope for. This must not continue to be endangered. Jacobus is to align his thoughts on this, and is also to refrain from his belligerent speeches against us, for now he too truly stands on the last branch, which has, moreover, become rather thin. This is also valid in reference to dealing with the other group members. These are the concerns for him, where still those things appear, which I already mentioned. It also applies to Elsie to fix all those irregularities and objectionable things, as I have already cited them. In addition to all this, there still comes the fact that the problem with the procreation of progeny cannot be solved, which is why the High Council has worked out another possibility, in the event that everything can still be continued. On the one hand, the problem of the procreation of progeny cannot be solved because flashes of jealousy result from this in different group members, which would come to degeneracy if this option were to be truly taken into consideration. As our clarification showed, a destruction of the group would be the consequence, because several group members would not be able to cope with the solution, even though it is the only one that would have been of absolutely secure value. But on the other hand, our analyses also showed that a suitable virgin, or even 2 of these, are not findable, who could take on this task and obligation. In the group itself, only a single virgin is to be found, who would not be up to the psychological burden of such a task, however. Other virgins, unfortunately, cannot be found in the group because the female group members are either already mothers or else unmarried persons who already lost their virginity years ago. For this reason, the only possibility that still remains open, as mentioned to us by the High Council, is for an additional, secondary group to be formed, whose members exceed the number of 49 and who are not included in everything in the strict form like the actual internal core group. The new enlarged group to be formed can comprise several hundred members, but it is also incorporated into the statutes, like also all other group members in the internal and external area. In this connection, you have to prepare extended statutes, but in the extensions, you must also incorporate the set obligations in accordance with the already existing statutes. Regarding the neglect of the use of the Sohar Center, A requirement must be introduced again because the waiving of the use has led to very negative values and to indifference with practically all group members, with only very few exceptions. I can give you a 14-day period for the plan of determination relating to this after I've transmitted this report to you. After that, I have to exchange a corresponding element in the control device, which will be programmed according to the data to be submitted to me. This element will then be coupled with an automatic control mechanism, which is programmed on the thought impulses of the individual group members and also on the group member candidates, and which automatically sets a corresponding circuit in function for the elimination of all values in the central piece if an unjustified and illogical absence from an exercise or registration occurs. But this also applies to a storage. This apparatus works in such a manner that it is able, in its half-organic operation, to determine genuine illness symptoms, evasions, and untrue information absolutely logically and independently, in order then, accordingly, to set a corresponding circuit into function which regulates the broad storage or the elimination of all data and powers. So in the future, if anyone stays away from the Sohar Center without a logical reason, so therefore, not as a result of truthful illness, non-availability for some compelling reason, nausea, or self-unintentional delay, then the individual's entire storage will be eliminated for that person, according to which the further use of the Sohar Center by the same becomes completely unnecessary because he or she will no longer be able to achieve successes therein, for which the control disk is also programmed. But this also means that all the forces of an incarnation storage would likewise be eliminated in such a case, whereby these then also fall out. This rule applies until everything is actually regulated. That is how we must act now, unfortunately, even if it seems very drastic. Due to the grossly negligent disregard, no other option remains open. But this also means that Jacobus must now educate himself on punctuality, because now only a delay of 6 minutes is accepted by the new regulation, according to which after this time, an introduction into the center would be pointless. The times given for the meditative exercises and storage remain the same, namely in such a manner as they are given to you. What is not functioning properly yet, with regard to the Sohar Center, is that it now also finally has to be understood by the responsible persons that they have to turn off their thoughts during the introduction of persons into the Sohar Center, which is not done, unfortunately. Quetzal has, indeed, invented and installed a suitable safeguard, which absorbs such power, but there is still constantly the risk that through the thoughts of the one introducing, some unpleasant incidents or damage will appear. For this reason, the one introducing should also ensure that nothing is spoken during the bringing in and the bringing out. And if this must happen, nevertheless, then it should only be done in a very quiet tone, but this should also be avoided if possible, because they are not capable of inhibiting their thoughts under a blockade, as you are able to do. You and also all group members, you all now have to be very clearly aware that I'm explaining all this to you on my own responsibility and that I still have absolutely no assurance that Quetzal, Ptah, Simyase, and above all the High Council are also in accordance with this action. But I give you and the group members my word that I will support you all up to the last possibility, but only under the reservations mentioned. I really cannot do more, which you must understand. However, I am very well in a position to be allowed to expect that I will have success. If this happens, then I will transmit our current conversation to you, which should then be the sign for you that I had success. If I would not achieve this, then I would come to you once again because I would then still like to discuss various matters with you.
Girl, you are a true piece of gold. Only now do I know why those among us speak of black gold. But they do not know that there is such a one that is 1,000,000 times more valuable than any oil. And you have maintained such a long speech, a true marathon achievement. But damn, I do not know how to thank you, oh come you black golden star.
Oh, you are so sweet and so very happy. Now it is very much easier for me. Very dear thanks, my dear friend.
I warned you once before of such a chain reaction.
That was not disagreeable to me, and I am very pleased about it. Somehow, I feel more lively and freer than during the last 60 minutes.
Certainly, Black Golden Star, so it is with me too. I feel somehow happy and freer again. Well, before I now undertake something, I will wait for so long until you announce yourself again to me. My preparing any new additional statutes, etc. before that probably makes no sense. Or what do you think about it?
I am of your view.
Well, then for the time being, I will not say much about our conversation, because if everything still goes wrong, then it is not necessary for the hot soup to be placed on the table. But now, would it still be possible for you to answer 1 or 2 to 3 questions for me?
I will do that very gladly. And just today and now, this gives me special joy.
Dear thanks, Black Golden Star. You know, I am sure that some lessons or messages should have been transmitted to me recently by Arahat Athersata and by the Patah Li level, but this has not happened so far. Can you tell me what is going on there?
Due to the unpleasant circumstances so very well known to you, it was ordered by the High Council for these additional transmissions to be cancelled for the time being, and it is even questionable whether they will ever still be released. It was explained that it would be pointless to continue to release the lessons and various other things from these levels if these would not be respected. As this has happened in a determining form by the group members, who are first and foremost always used for comparisons. The regulation relating to this is that the group members will be rated in accordance with their evolution, and after that, a decision will be made. If it is found that the group members, in accordance with their evolution, are not yet able to process and follow the intended lessons, etc., then this certainly cannot be the case for the rest of earthly humanity, because this possesses much less knowledge with regard to all these things. Therefore, the group and its members act as the true measure, according to which it, therefore, decides whether the earthly humanity shall move forward in consciousness, evolution, or still live in stagnation in this regard for a very long time.
So that is how it is. I did not know that, at least not to the full extent. Then I have a somewhat complicated question. Through various calculations, I have, another time, encountered the fact that something cannot be right with the dimensions of our present. From this to the Centaurus groups, as well as to Lyra and Vega, and even to the Pleiades. According to my calculations, these suns and planets addressed, of which there was already often talk between Simya Se, Quetzal and me, as well as between Ptah and me, would really have to be in other dimensions, as it was said to me repeatedly. This would therefore actually mean that their Lyra and Vega human beings, and still some others, are just as non-existent in our present dimension as also the Pleiadians and the Centaurus human beings. And if my calculations are right, then you all would have to live just a fraction of a second in the future to our space-time configuration, which for us, however, results in a difference of several thousand years with regard to technological development. But how this is connected, that is a riddle to me, and it could even be very difficult to understand. But Ta once spoke of the fact that on that or on a planet of the Centaurus groups, a people lives in overpopulation, which comprises about 120 billion, 120,000, thousand. So these, then would have to live in the future, as seen by us. On the other hand, I also calculated that at that time, around 22 million years ago, when the events took place in the Lyra and Vega area, which eventually led to the visits to our Earth. At that time, through some skillful manipulations, the Lyra and Vega refugees fell into the past and so penetrated into our space-time level. With certainty, this was no so-called chance, but rather a full calculation. This arose from my contemplation of the fact that the technology of your ancestors was already so widely developed at that time that these would have tracked and found the refugees with certainty. But since that was not the case, the refugees must have retreated into areas that fell outside of the control of the pursuers. But concerning this, there are only two possibilities, so namely the past or the future. But as I know the things now, the refugees were not able to venture into the future, so only the past remained open to them, to where they then actually also retreated. And because the past comprises millions of years and even billions of years in a life potential form, the pursuit was given up. But this, in turn, means that the technology of your ancestors was not yet developed so far that they would have been able to carry out detections in the areas of the past or the future. But I now know from Ta's Great Spacer that this is possible for you today, and that you know how to locate any structural vibration in any area of the past or future within seconds on the basis of computer analyses.
How did you reach these results?
Through various calculations, when I grappled with the expansion rate and thus also with hyperspace, normal space, and with time, as well as with the pertinent information and remarks from Simya-Se, Ptah, Quetzal, and Asket.
That is amazing, and I already heard about your calculations. But that you have now found out even these things, this may very well surpass everything else. Your statements, up to the last, fully agree with the actual events. My dear friend, I would like to own your head.
You are exaggerating once again, my black golden child.
Those are my sincere thoughts. I now suppose that you will even understand the issues surrounding space shifts and time shifts when I explain this to you in detail, about which you would have to preserve silence, however, under all circumstances. Only there is, indeed, no longer enough time for that today, for I now must say goodbye. I have considered some things during the last minutes, which I will very well take to hand in such a manner as I have worked them out myself. But I will give you my word that I will still explain to you the details about space and time and the shifts under all circumstances, no matter what will happen. If you want this,
But of course. Then now, farewell, you most lovable, tremendous creature of the universe. And please see to it that you convey all my loving greetings, quite especially to Simya-Se, and wish her a speedy recovery.
you are very sweet, and I know exactly what you feel for a human being when you give him or her your peculiar pet names. Go in joy and peace, and be assured that I will do my best. Goodbye, my dearest friend.
Oh, very dear thanks, you lift me into the sky. Bye, girl, Black Rose, tremendous. Take care.
Goodbye. This is my most beautiful day here on the earth. Really, it is worthwhile to do my best.
Continuation of the contact.
Once again, I must come back, for I failed to explain several important things to you in connection with the expansion of a new group beyond the 49, and for the simplified developmental work for the first group. Quetzal decided, due to advice from the High Council, that in the future, for the remaining developmental time of 5 years, no tests for admission into and use of the Sohar Center will be required for candidates of the internal group. However, a good study of the entire teaching and an appropriate training in this is to be completed. During the first period, the Sohar Center is to be used by the newcomers only for meditative purposes, and then, after 6 months, the storage is to be carried out. The times for the meditation and the storage remain the same, to the extent that only a slight change appears, namely as follows.
Internal time data and rules of behavior.
Otherwise, the explanations apply, which I have already given.
Then I am to procure for you, or rather for us, a suitable clock. Is that what you mean?
I spoke of that, yes.
Then I still have a question regarding non-core group members. How does it stand with these with regard to the meditation?
There, the statutes remain valid as they are given.
And what about the members of the expanded external group?
These also fall under the statutes in full. An exemption from the tests and the corresponding waiting periods of 6 or 24 months only applies to the internal core group of 49 persons, which is responsible for all duties specified in the statutes and also for the 2-time participation in the group meetings each month.
And when should the new regulation take place now, with regard to the Sohar Center?
I already told you that you have a 10 to 14-day time period for the determination of times for the individual group members after I will transmit the report to you. During this time, however, the only ones who may use the Sohar Center are those whose times are constant in the future, when the time measuring device should already be in operation. So this means that from the point in time of the utilization of the time measuring device on the use times of the Sohar Center, these will be registered automatically and individually for the individual users, and these may then be kept in the future and may no longer be changed. Exceptions for the non-use of the Sohar Center are only valid in the context of that which I have explained with regard to the self-deciding machines. Omissions of all illogical kinds lead to the fact that after 3 such incidents, the whole storage of the person concerned becomes completely eliminated by automatic means, after which any further use of the Sohar Center becomes senseless and pointless for this person in the mentioned relation.
That should be clear and should also be understood. So reasons for absence are only valid if these reasons are based on a logical basis, which means that an introduction into the Sohar Center is impossible or very difficult to carry out for important or compelling reasons.
My words mean that, as I have already mentioned before, however, these issues should now be made clear. But now, I would still like to explain to you that it has turned out that the planned public presentations had better be ceased because the organization, from the side of you all, is so deficient that all of you would fall into large expenses which you are not able to cover. Therefore, you all are advised to omit these presentations, so all of you are released from our conditions relating to this. For these types of enterprises, you all lack the appropriate organizational talents, as we were able to clarify. But it is now still advised to you that you finally free yourself from some workloads because too many things weigh on you, which are detrimental to your own work.
I know. Particularly the regulation of the bookkeeping and the financial concerns always gives me a hard time.
That is well known to us, and that is no doubt one of the main tasks that you should give up and pass on to someone else. The group members must concern themselves with handing this task over to other loyal hands. But you should now also finally free yourself more and more from various manual activities, because, as I told you, too many things weigh on you, whereby you are not able to do your own work, or you can only do small parts of it.
That is easily said, although you are right, but I simply see no solution.
All group members must concern themselves with that, because your health leaves more and more to be desired.
It is now improving quite quickly, though.
You are not able to deceive me, because I see the things much clearer then.
Oh, just leave it.
It is, nevertheless, as I said. But now I really have to leave. If I have transmitted the report to you, and you have procured the time measuring device, then call me. If possible, I will then come to you immediately.
How long will it take with the clock and the control disk until these things are regulated?
It is a work of a few minutes, which, moreover, I can do alone.
Good, then I will say goodbye. Take care, girl. Bye.
Goodbye. Hope to see you again soon.